The French government, PayPal, Wynn Resorts, Canadian gun owners, like all of them, and so many more are part of this week's Breaches of the Week. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Nick Espinoza, and let's dive in. And this week in data breaches is absolutely nuts. But thank you very much to Jacqueline Wolf, Cooper Patel, Ronald Jackson, and Bill Dubois for sending a lot of this information in. It is always appreciated. Please keep sending those tips my way. And with that, we're going to start in Taipei, Taiwan, with the Grand Hotel. Apparently, they have been warning customers that if they receive a suspicious email asking for confirmation of details or payment information, it ain't the Grand Hotel. So, best of luck. We don't know any more than that right now. But if you've stayed at the Grand Hotel in Taipei, or possibly another Grand Hotel if they've got a franchise, you might want to check in. Moving on, let's head on over to Utah and talk about WeCare Pediatrics. That's we with two E's. An unauthorized person, unfortunately, gained access into their facility. And we are talking dates of birth, social security, treatment and diagnosis information, prescription and medication information, dates of service, provider names, medical record numbers, patient account numbers, Medicare, Medicaid ID numbers, health insurance information, and probably anything else that wasn't nailed down. So if you take your kids to WeCare Pediatrics in Utah, best of luck to you. Never fun when the kids are caught up in these. Moving on, Catalyst RCM. They are a provider of revenue cycle management solutions, and they just published a dark data breach notice on their website earlier this month, revealing that they detected suspicious activity in their file system November of last year. This is a third party breach. So now their customers are starting to have to declare. And by virtue of that, the first one that we have is Vicor Scientific, now known as Vanta Diagnostics, for names, dates of birth, payment card details, medical info, and health insurance information as well. So this is going to be a big one, but Catalyst RCM is now on my watch list. Moving on, we're going to do our brand new segment, or actually, this is the second time we've done this segment, entitled Hoser of the Week. Yes, that's right. This is the Canadian data breach of the week that we're not fans of. And this one, it's actually an update on Canadian Tire. Now, originally, Canadian Tire said at the time that basically the compromised information included names, emails, dates of birth, encrypted passwords, and in some cases, incomplete credit cards. And they also mentioned that fewer than 150,000 accounts basically had date of birth details compromised. And here's the update. This past week, the data set associated with the incident was added to the data breach website, Have I Been Pwned? According to that website, roughly 42 million records were compromised in the attack, including 38.3 million email addresses. So, in addition to the details shared by Canadian Tire, the leak also compromised data, including addresses, phone numbers, and gender information as well. And really, guys? Really? Just be honest when you go through a data breach. That's all I ask. Moving on. Back into real time, let's go to the University of Hawaii's Cancer Center. A data breach there basically exposed the social security numbers of 1.15 million people. The University of Hawaii said it in a news release and on their website that they have set up basically a information gathering system so that people potentially affected could essentially go to the site and get information. They have written letters to 87,493 patients of a cancer research study who also might have been affected by this, and sent emails to another 900,000 whose personal information might have been stolen as well. Never a good look, but hopefully the University of Hawaii will get that under control. Moving on. Popular DIY home improvement and gardening e-commerce site known as Mano Mano in France. Now, they suffered a third-party data breach, which basically saw them lose sensitive customer data to the tune of about 38 million customers. In January 2026, a threat actor known as Indra allegedly broke into a customer support service provider in Tunis through a Zendesk account. From there, they proceeded to exfiltrate sensitive customer data. We're talking full names, email addresses, phone numbers, customer service records, all this kind of stuff. And in a dark web force post, and I don't think any gang has ever done poetry in the dark web, just call it a hunch. Indra said that they basically hit 37.8 million people basically by hitting Mano Mano in France. So if you get all your DIY stuff from Mano Mano, check in. Moving on, I want to give you an update on the Dutch telecom giant Odido. Essentially, the criminal group behind the hack at Odido has begun publishing information on the dark web. Personal data of 6 million customers from the firm basically include names, telephone numbers, email addresses, bank accounts, dates of birth, and passport numbers. They believe the Shiny Hunters group is behind this. Moving on, I want to give you an update on Conduent. Again, these guys are always in the news. The Conduit breach has quietly grown into one of the biggest third party data incidents in US history now. Initially, public filings suggested that roughly 10.5 million affected individuals, heavily concentrated in Oregon and a few other states. However, new state notifications reportedly put that total at more than 25 million across the United States, with Texas alone jumping from an early estimate of 4 million to about 15.4 million, and Oregon's holding steady at about 10.5 million. This makes this one of the largest healthcare related breaches on record, with attackers reportedly spending about 3 months in Conduit's environment and exfiltrating around 8 terabytes of data. That is an enormous amount of data that they exfiltrated. Really shows you really need to be monitoring these things. Moving on, Wynn Resorts, the large resort system, I believe very heavily located in Las Vegas. They said this past Tuesday that attackers obtained employee data and the company was investigating the data breach. They said this had no impact on our guest experience, our operations, or our physical properties, which are all fully operational and open for business. I cannot speak today, apparently. A representative of the hacking group told Reuters that basically they were demanding 22.34 Bitcoin, worth roughly $1.5 million at the time, probably worth 7.5 thousand at this point. Bitcoin's going up and down, lost a lot of value. Now, the representative for the ransomware gang would not comment on any payments as of this past Tuesday, but also said the data had been deleted, which implies that Wynn Resorts has indeed paid the 1.5 million or whatever the equivalent of Bitcoin that was at the time. So, woo, there we go. Hopefully, everything will get back to normal. Hopefully, no data will actually leak. Moving on, let's talk about a company called Optimizely. Now, on February 23rd, they basically reported a data breach. Unauthorized access was identified on February 11th. A threat actor group known as Shiny Hunters, and you've heard that name over and over if you're a regular listener of mine, has taken credit for this. And essentially, apparently, they just got basic business contact information. And the security incident basically was through a phishing attack, voice phishing. So they must have called basically Optimizely's support and got right in. This basically is considered a medium risk, according to reporting, because while internal systems were breached, the attackers were unable to access sensitive customer databases or escalate privileges. In other words, they got basic info and called it a day. So Optimizely quasi protected on this. Not that it's great they broke in, but they didn't get the jewels. So that's always good. And we also have another finally for you, but this is a Hoser of the Week runner up. And this is the Canadian Firearms Program. Now, if you didn't know, the CFP is the statutory program basically run by the RCMP, that's the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, to oversee firearms licenses and registration in Canada. Unlike the United States, Canada's firearms are very heavily regulated. And so, by virtue of that, it is quite difficult. You can do it. It's quite difficult to acquire firearms. Handguns are basically verboten, but rifles and shotguns tend to be what the Canadians can get. This means, though, that the RCMP obtains and manages sensitive personal data on every licensed gun owner and gun business in the entire country of Canada, all provinces and territories. And so it's compelled to basically provide this information to the government. Now, 5 years ago, basically the Canadian Firearms Right news site known as the gunblog.ca reported that information in the CFB was jeopardized due to a possible ransomware attack incident on a private company, end quote, providing services basically in connection with the CFP. So in other words, the CFP was hosting this with a third party provider, cyber attack. Here we go. And again, that's according to a gun blog that is Canadian focused for firearm ownership. We'll see. Now, at the time, the gunblog.ca noted the CFP website posted a warning about the attack as well as a statement advising that the quote CFP will communicate any pertinent updates as they become available, end quote. The statement was deleted a few days later, and the reference to the cyber attack itself was deleted in June 21st. The Investigative Journalist Foundation, or IJF, has now published basically further information related to this incident. In an article entitled Hack Linked to Gun Licensing Program Was Biggest Federal Data Breach in Last 5 Years." Basically, they document, or have documents, and that essentially reveals that not only did the RCMP failed to warn affected gun owners about the attack more generally, but it also delayed reporting the incident to the Office of the Privacy Commissioner until September of 2021, months after the RCMP first learned of it. Now, I'm watching this one. Like I said, gun ownership is not like it is in the United States. It's vastly regulated. But the reason why basically the CFP is the runner up for Hoser of the Week is that Canadian Tire is not restrictive. Every Canadian goes to Canadian Tire at some point in their life. They have flipping everything. And so Canadian Tire getting breached impacts more people, but obviously having information leaked about gun owners is an incredibly sensitive thing, especially since if you're basically going to be robbing or stealing people, then you've got a list of where you can actually obtain guns. Never a good thing. So best of luck. Hopefully the data is actually locked down, but if I learn any more, I'll keep you up to date on this one. And finally, we have yet another Canadian situation. Like I said, it feels like this is Canada week. So we're talking again about the CIRO, that is the Canadian Investment Regulatory Organization. And this is an update on their absolute total disaster from months ago. I actually did the CIRO as a finally back then and really talked about just how damaging this was to financial regulators. Now, here's the update, because some people who've had their personal data stolen in the CIRO data breach last August say they are facing a frustrating process when trying to sign up for credit monitoring services that essentially the CIRO is paying for. Now, if you recall, about 750,000 investors were affected by this last August 11th. And understand, if you have a financial advisor in Canada, the CIRO has everything on them, not just like names, addresses, and license numbers, but for anti-fraud purposes, they have every trade, every bank account information, all of this. So they know your stock portfolio in real time. Getting that breached really can lay a footprint into some people that may be incredibly wealthy in Canada, or expose information that, let's say, a licensed broker, dealer, financial advisor wouldn't want their customers to see. Oh my God, you're not making as much money as I thought you were, buddy. And so not a good look, but I'll keep you up to date on that. I did actually reach out to a Canadian financial advisor to see if they were having issues with signing up, and they weren't. So I guess maybe it's hit or miss, or maybe it's provincially, but either way, it ain't good. Moving on. Another finally we have for today, and there were a few of these. We're heading back to France to talk about the Ministry of Economics, Finance, and Industrial and Digital Sovereignty. Kind of. Now, it's interesting. Now, basically, it was revealed that an unknown attacker accessed the French government's database listing every bank account in the country and then made off with 1.2 million records. So, in other words, every single bank account that is within the country of France or in a French financial institution is in this database, and these jerks just got 1.2 million records, account numbers, account holder addresses, tax identification numbers. They impersonated a civil servant with access rights, basically for interministerial information exchange, and was able to get this kind of information. This again is incredibly damning as well, because if they've got even more detailed information than that, then what's stopping them from going to the wealthiest in France, because they've got the addresses and they may know, oh, this person's worth $1 billion, might as well rob him as opposed to the guy that's worth $1,000, right? So never a good look. And our finally today, if I'm remembering my notes correctly, is PayPal. Yes, PayPal, the massive payment platform that is used by millions around the world. They've started notifying business customers of a data breach that basically exposed personal information, including social security numbers, that lasted for 6 months in 2025. That was from July 1st through December 12th of last year. Now, specifically, it affected users of the PayPal Working Capital loan app, and provides that basically provides small businesses with loans. This is also known as the PPWC. Now, apparently, there was a software error in the loan application, and PayPal said in its breach notification letter that it discovered the breach on December 12th and immediately reversed the code that caused it. In other words, they fixed the problem as soon as they saw it. They also said that basically they went about blocking bad actors' access on the following day. So, in other words, they determined malicious activity due to a mistake they made in the coding, or whoever coded it for them and that was up for about 6 months, reversed it, and then had to excise attackers, meaning attackers are actively in it. Now, according to the payment company, the breach exposed customer names, email addresses, phone numbers, social security, meaning United States, and dates of birth. So, if you're using PayPal, and odds are, if you're watching or listening to this, you are in some way, shape, or form, even if it's minor. I have a PayPal account I use like once every 4 years, but I have one, So, anyway, best of luck. And those were your breaches of the week. Absolutely insane week. Were you impacted? Let me know. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at Nick AESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please, 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 don't stay private, secure, and informed. Take care.